Thursday meetings that, there's a kind of a slowing or kind of decline in the rate of vaccination distribution throughout the country. And I think we're trying to figure out why that is, or, what we can do to best combat that. So if you're joining us today via Zoom or via Facebook streaming, please chime in and, let us know, if you've gotten the vaccine, why did you get the vaccine? And if you haven't yet, what are your hesitancies, or why haven't you? Or, are you planning on getting it in the near future, or, are you not planning on getting it all? We're just kind of interested to see what people have to say out there. But we'll tackle those discussions today, as well as just overall updates on what's going on. Again, if you're joining us via Zoom, there is a chat bubble feature on the bottom where you can drop in a question there. If you're joining us via Facebook Live, just drop in a comment on our live stream there, and you can we'll get to those questions at the end in our Q&A session. So as per usual, I'm going to pass it off to Mark Denning, our great friend who's been here since week one, day one. So thanks again for being here, Mark, and thank you all for joining us.
Bonjour and Maganaduk, Nadawe Benazi, Indigenous cause, Namando Dem, Anishinaabe and Dow, Neopen and Donjaba, Sturgeon Clan present and accounted for. Good news for those of you tuning in from the Milwaukee area. Just a few weeks ago, we had our first lake sturgeon spotted in the Milwaukee River in over 180 years. That means nobody watching, none of your grandparents were alive, or great-grandparents for that matter, may not have been alive in that last occurrence. And I think that marks a good reason and a good place for the health of our city of Milwaukee. Environmentally, it's a great sign. And Menominee canoers were here just a few weeks following that appearance of those lake sturgeon, which are so vitally important to our culture. So what a great thing. But to get to that place where that sturgeon appeared, it took decades of work of restoration. It took knowledge, it took science. It took a lot of people coming together to create a place for that to happen. And it's going to take a lot more people to protect it so it continues to happen. And you can know where I'm going with this. We also have a battle. And that battle with COVID-19 is happening for our communities. You're seeing it in our tribal leadership, that a lot of our tribes entering into the powwow season are now looking at, when do we open up the powwows? When do we have our social events? Right now, a lot of those are scheduled for August. That's where people are placing those dates. We also know that it'll take just one nation, one tribe for their decision to say, we're gonna go in June. Next thing you know, everybody's lining up for June. We need to educate ourselves. We need to be able to talk about the difference between vaccine hesitancy and vaccine deniers, because some people in our world would just never convince. Think about the folks in India, praying for them always, in understanding the challenges they face. There are plenty of vaccine deniers in India as well. And we can kind of know if herd immunity that Dr. Ignace has talked about for so many weeks, what happens if that herd immunity is allowed to go naturally? And we can see what the results of that thinking brings. And certainly we've seen some of the results in our own community, being number 2 in transmission and number 1 in fatalities for several weeks. It was painful. So this is my opening in saying that, there's even, I would say, even oxygen deniers out there, which is incredible. But we hear of them saying, people will say, well, we shouldn't give oxygen to people. It's not natural. Or oxygen has killed lots of people. Look at the industry of people who deal with oxygen and how many people have perished because they work in the industry of oxygen or providing oxygen. That's the level that we've come down to. And we need to rise the level of conversation, and we need to rise the level of awareness. And that's why we're here. is to talk about this and talk about it from a place of knowledge. And we hope that you're talking about it, and also that you're going to respond to a show like this where we're talking about vaccine hesitancy. How is it that we can prevent COVID-19 from spinning into our communities where so many of us have become vaccinated and so many of us have not, where it comes into this group of many, many people and it hits just a segment of our people? You imagine the challenges to health in just one group and segment of people that would then feel like they've been pointed out for whatever reason. It's not too late. We need to have these conversations, so let's have them. Dr. Ignace, good to see you. Good to see you healthy. And here we go.
Thanks, Mark, and welcome back, Jeremiah. And yeah, important topics, talking about hesitancy and another concept of wait and see what happens. The issue of ex-vaxxers and individuals just being outright scared. It all comes into play. And so this forum is really about providing you information and maintaining facts and trying to be objective and allowing people to be informed decision makers on not only what's best for yourself, but also for your family. So let me get people updated as to where we are now and where you as a viewer can make decisions informed decisions for yourself. So I highlighted areas because these are important areas. And what I'm hearing is a lot of Pfizer comments, Moderna comments. That's predominantly what's taking up the airwaves right now. Now, we know about India. We know that there is a variant that is coming out of India right now. And looking at how Pfizer and Moderna can help combat these variants, more and more studies are coming out that both Pfizer and Moderna are showing to be more effective. Not only do they work, but they're more effective than people originally thought against variants. What we don't know right now is how well do the Pfizer Moderna vaccines work against this new variant out of India. It's too early, and information is rather scant to evaluate and analyze. So I was talking with my staff earlier today, this slide in particular, about what does the future look like here in terms of vaccines. So we know that everyone right now 16 and older is eligible for the vaccine, and things that are coming out of Pfizer and Moderna right now look like they are creating, based on the mRNA technology, boosters. And boosters, at least from Pfizer, they're looking at the B117. Moderna's looking at a booster for the B1351, the South African variant. Early data suggests that their booster is just as effective as their original vaccine that came out. And that's good news. That's what I would anticipate would be the case. So now what's interesting here is when do these boosters come out? And it sounds like they are pushing the date, or at least the timeline, for September. And this is kind of interesting because the cold and flu season starts in October, and flu becomes available in late August, early September. And so these boosters are going to be coming out at the same time as the flu shot. Moderna is looking at combining both flu shot and their booster at the same time, so to create at least a single shot booster and flu. Now, in addition to that, the trials are pushing for 6 months and older, and the data from there is actually looking quite good as well. So the Pfizer CEO came out, I think a couple of days ago, and basically informed the world that they're looking to push an FDA emergency use authorization perhaps as early as next week. And they're looking for the 12 to 15 years of age to be vaccinated. And what I find interesting in that is that the data that has come out is like 96% effective in not only prevention, but also looking at the transmission of the virus. And so this is actually extremely good news for that teenager, middle school, teenage, high school age groups. And they will more than likely get approval, and this is going to roll out. And as a result, they're looking at the possibility of having not only this for this age group to be available, but also that 6 month and older available for the beginning of the next school year. They have ramped up distribution, not just here in the United States, but throughout the entire world. Everyone is leaning more and more towards Pfizer. They say they have 2.5 billion in doses in capacity. They've contracted out 1.6 billion of these doses to date so far. So that is going to help a tremendous amount of people right now. What also came out from the CEO is that that no variant escapes the Pfizer vaccine right now. And as I mentioned, they are working on the booster for the B117, but they're also looking at the South African variant as well. And any modification to any of their vaccines right now can be ready within 100 days from any modification, which I find absolutely remarkable. As I was telling my staff, 100 days, basically 3.5 months to change course and modify your vaccine to accommodate a new variant means this is so much in real time that this has never happened in the history of medicine. Typically, vaccines take 3-4 years to not only go from research and development into actually distributing a vaccine. They're actually able to do this now in 100 days. And I find that absolutely amazing, because with the course of what's going on right now, we see all of these variants, the UK, South African, the Brazilian, the California, the New York, India. There's nothing to say that there are more variants that are coming down that will occur. And what's equally good to know is that we have the technology and the capability to modify vaccines and have vaccines perhaps ready to go within 100 days from this. So this is really good news. This is really good news because it allows medicine to stay in alignment with what this virus is doing. Now, the downside to this, and what is looking more and more what's going to happen is we may end up looking at an annual an annual COVID vaccine. We won't be calling them boosters, we'll be calling them vaccines because it may become a regular part of what we do annually with the flu shot. Now remember, with the flu shot, the flu's been around for a very long time. And every year, researchers and biotech companies develop flu vaccines to accommodate or at least predict what will happen in the future, 12 months from now, 18 months from now. So they are picking on where the flu may modify, develop the vaccine in anticipation of what will happen next year. Well, now that we have the mRNA technology, we may be able to dramatically increase vaccine effectiveness by knowing what that strain of flu is closer to the flu season, rather than 12, 18 months ahead of time. Now we can say, what does it look like 6 months before the cold and flu season, create that vaccine to that, and have the most effective vaccine in real time within 6 months to actually the season starting. Same thing with COVID. Knowing where COVID is now in its original as well as its variant stages, now we can look at predicting or creating a vaccine that not only covers the original virus, but also its mutant variant viruses, and maximizing its efficacy as much as possible in real time, and creating this in real time moving forward in order to protect us. Because the science here is indicating that this virus is going to be here more than just July 4th, that this is going to be here and it may become a regular part. As cold and flu, it may be cold, flu, and COVID season type of presence of this virus. Moderna's come out, as I mentioned. They have said that their vaccine for teenagers 12 to 17 is showing to be 96% effective. Now, what they're looking at is their version of the 12 and 17 to be applied for emergency use a little further down the road here, but they're looking at anticipation of the beginning of the next school year. So they are very confident in its effectiveness, but they're also looking at it for the future and when can this be applied to middle and high school students in anticipation before the season, before the school season. So we're looking at a September timeframe for Moderna to be available. So now we'll look at having both Pfizer and Moderna, 12 and older, before the next school year. And then probably around when school starts, they will probably also be looking at the 6 month and older age group and being available at that time. So a lot of things are moving forward. Science is moving forward. The objective facts and data are starting to become more and more apparent, and not only how effective this is and how safe, but also looking at the prevention and transmission of the virus and reducing the rate of infection in communities. So this is really important information. Now, a lot of this information we're getting out of Israel, and mainly because Israel has been so effective in vaccinating the population. They're a population of close to 7 million people, 6.8 million, 5 million people in Israel have actually been fully vaccinated, and more than 70% of the population. So from the very beginning, from day one of vaccinating, they've been doing an ongoing clinical trials on everybody, all age groups, all ethnicities, all scenarios, looking for and actually following people for the vaccine and also its transmission and breakthrough infections. And so what they're finding is that 2 doses are quite effective in reducing and prevention of COVID. And what they're finding is at least the first dose is certainly to be effective, but the second dose increases that protection, not just from 7 days after the second dose, but also at 14. So there is a continuation and a continued presence of increased immunity that someone can have. So looking at what's going on here in Wisconsin, speaking to variants, and so what is looking like now is the predominance of the UK B117 variant here in Wisconsin. Now, from when you look at this data set, Wisconsin has been surveilling positive COVIDs, looking at the strain, whether it's the original virus versus of the variant, and looking at the variants and determining what type of variant that we're seeing. This has dramatically changed from last week and even 2 weeks ago, where it looked like maybe the California variant was maybe taking hold here, but that's actually not the case. What is happening is the B117, the UK variant, is now becoming the predominant outside of the original virus. It is now looking like the B117 is now the secondary primary variant that is showing up. Now, what's important to realize is that being vaccinated against the original virus, it has been shown to be almost as equally effective in the UK B117 variant in its protection as well. So as this virus changes, know that being vaccinated not only protects you, but also protects you against this particular variant that is showing up here in Wisconsin. So the dynamic has changed, whereas last week certain areas were of California and UK. Now it's entirely the UK variant. 84% are still showing as being the primary original virus. 16% are showing up to be variant, but more than 11% of the variants are now all UK. So this is a pretty clear indication that not to dismiss the other variants, it's just that this variant is now going to be the predominant, and we'll have one-off infections of being the other, but know that being vaccinated does have protection to the B117. So what we know, everyone's been hearing and following what's going on in India. Pretty dramatic right now. They are averaging over 400,000 cases a day. And maybe this is the moment of plateau for India. Now, I take this number with a grain of salt because we know here in the United States that there is always a level of underreporting. We haven't talked about asymptomatic cases. And so most of the time, people who are asymptomatic don't go get tested. You know, they still are very much part of the community and circulation, and they they go about their business having maybe being infected but have no symptoms, so why get tested if I don't have symptoms? Then we have individuals who may have mild symptoms but don't get tested. So there is a population of that ongoing. We know that here in the United States. There's no reason why it's not going on in India. So even though they may be reporting out 400,000, I suspect that there is even more on top of this. And, you know, we've talked about what that rate of asymptomatic cases may be. And it could be anywhere from 10% to as high as 30, maybe 40% of asymptomatic cases are ongoing. So if you think about 400,000 cases a day, even if you think, let's say 20%, you may be missing 80,000 cases on a daily basis. So are we really talking about 400,000, or are we talking about 500,000 cases, 500,000 cases a day in India? And somewhere in between lies the true numbers. But believe me, India is seriously in trouble, and hard to say if this is actually plateauing or this is going to continue to progress. And that is going to be hard to say. I think next week and another week coming back here, letting you know what that looks like. I hope it's plateauing, and I hope it starts trending downward, but time is going to tell in the next week how that's going to all play out. If we look at Israel, as I mentioned in the previous study, you know, in the past couple of days, Israel has actually had less than 80 cases a day, and that's pretty remarkable. That's pretty remarkable, given the population. As I mentioned, more than 70% of the community has been vaccinated. They've reached their herd immunity state, that threshold. And now they're seeing the benefits of that by such a dramatic reduction in the number of cases in the country. Same with the United Kingdom. They are now looking at less than 2,000 cases a day. They are at that level of threshold as well of herd immunity. And one of the things that is coming out is, how did the UK get to such a high level? You know, because they are, you know, free and democratic society. People can make their own decisions about the vaccine. They didn't force people. They certainly made it available. And people had decisions to make about whether or not to get it or not. So why was the UK so dramatically effective in getting their population vaccinated? And it really comes down to one major factor. And that major factor is actually being upfront and direct and even blunt about the facts. Whether it was good, whether it was bad, people wanted to know. You know, they didn't sugarcoat it. They didn't, you know, talk around issues. They were very matter of fact, and people wanted that. The people wanted information, whether it was good or bad. At least they were informed, and people were making informed decisions for themselves. I don't know if that's quite the same what is occurring here. Now, information gets talked about in generalities here. And so you have to go search and research and to get the information that you actually want. In the UK, quite different. Blunt, to the point, facts. And when AstraZeneca came out, the UK was directly upfront with its people about what was going on, what the disorder was. And rather than pause and stop the AstraZeneca vaccines, in real time, they were able to not only evaluate it, but also modify the recommendations. And so, but they kept going without pausing, without any intermediate stoppage in vaccine, but they kept the population informed. And so I think that's a big difference what is occurring here, because we hear things, but we don't get the full story. We get half the story. And so I think that's important to realize why there may be a hesitancy. Now, when we look at hesitancy, and I did have slides, but I didn't include them in this presentation, but I wanted to bring this up, is that we have a hesitancy of different age groups. Now, individuals that are 50 and older, there's no question that they, not only did they want to get it, but they knew that if they got it, it would be available. And so there was no question which age group, how important it was for that to get to that age group to get immunized. And that's really 50 and older. What we'd have a tremendous hesitancy are the younger population. Now, information is coming out about the 30 to 49-year-old age groups. Yeah, there is a hesitancy, but when you compare that group to the 18 and 29-year-old age groups, that younger age group is even higher. So almost 50% of people age 18 to 29 either have no intention of getting the vaccine. They question whether and they question and hesitate, and also they want to wait and see. So that makes up about 50% of age group 18 to 29 who have that hesitancy. And guess what? We know by looking at the numbers and the data that has been occurring is that this 18 to 29-year-olds are the predominant age group who are getting the infection, who are getting COVID. Now, is that because we've been talking about for months how effective the vaccine is? And when looking at age groups, younger age groups, yes, they do get COVID, but they don't get as sick, and they certainly don't get admitted to the hospital, and rarely do they go to the ICU, and rarely do they ever have poor outcomes. So now, on top of that, they are the last age group to actually get immunized. So we started priority age groups, high age groups, and started working our way back down to the younger age group. So there is a lot of hesitancy going on, particularly 30 and younger. And there may be a sense of invincibility here. And, if I get sick, I'm not going to get too sick. So it's like a cold, why bother? Well, the impact of being infected, it goes beyond just oneself and goes to the entire family unit and extended family and all of the activities that we like to do as a whole in our communities and our own social networks. And so, the 18 to 29-year-old age group, that is the biggest group that not only is the least immunized, but also has the highest rate of infection, and also showing the highest rate of hesitancy moving forward. So the data, the information is becoming more and more clear. Who's getting it, who's not, who's getting infected, and getting a better understanding of hesitancy as to why this is occurring. So here is a slide looking at single dose vaccines, 43.7% of the states, looking at the racial and ethnic backgrounds. If you look at the more center aspect, you will see that 65 and older, 81% of the population, 65 and older, have had at least a single dose, which is extremely good. As you go down in age group, you see the rates of immunization dramatically go down to that younger population. Now, when we look at the data and how the data breaks out, I look at data over time on a weekly basis and look at trends that are going on. Now, looking at the center highlighted yellow data block, you will see that the number of vaccines that occur by race within that time frame. Now, I unhighlighted dates by race because that is the date when the greatest number of vaccines occurred in that particular race or ethnic group. And we see that back in March 17th, that was the peak in the native population. And since then, the rate of new, the number of new infections has gone down steadily every week following that. Now, Asians, Blacks, whites, and Hispanic, you see all kind of run almost pretty close in parallel as to when the number of single dose immunizations occurred, and now that every ethnic group is now trending downwards. So that's a clear indication now that we're looking at almost 4 weeks now of decline. We're kind of, well, today's Thursday, so we're like 3.5 weeks of decline of new infections. So clearly it's declining. Now, when we look at the rate, percent rate of change, we see that in the native population, that this decrease, it peaked on March 3rd. And so since then, the decline has continued ever since, and you see that the numbers just continue to decrease. Now, when we look at fully vaccinated, having 2 doses, 35.3% of the population, again, we see that the rates by race and ethnicity are starting to level out amongst one another. When we look at the rate of percent change, you see the peaks that are occurring for April 14th and sliding downwards ever since. Same with Asians, same with Blacks, same with whites, Hispanics. Every race, ethnicity has now showing an obvious decline. When we look at the state overall, again, we've been able to administer over 4.5 million doses, but when we look at the trend of what's going on, we are now averaging less than 34,000 doses a day. So there's definitely a peak that has occurred, and given that this is halfway through this week, I'm going to say 4 weeks of decline in people getting the vaccine, and more than likely this will continue to decline. It's just at what rate will this decline continue at? And it's just not here in Wisconsin, it's throughout the entire United States. So here is the bar graph looking at, if you look at the red line, you see that being the 7-day average. As of the 30th, April 30th, that average is now 2.1 million doses per day. And you can see and look at this and notice that this decline isn't just from yesterday. This is an ongoing decline, almost a full month of decline that is occurring. So when we look at the population overall, now we're seeing total population of 44.7 who've gotten single dose, more than likely will go on to being fully vaccinated. The total population, percent population of 65 and older is now at 83%, which is extremely good. It's better than any flu vaccine season that the U.S. goes through. 83% of 65 and older, that is a huge accomplishment of this age group. But as you can see, 2.1, the slide is continuing to ongoing, and it will continue to be ongoing. And I suspect that next week that will be less than 2 million doses per day, and the slide will continue. What's going on in India country? Some encouraging facts that are going on. So looking at the trend, you can see that in the past week, only one area, that being Portland, as being highlighted yellow, showing any indication of an upward trend. And when we look at the overall number of new infections in Indian country, 838. So we get a kind of a better picture of what's going on. So since the introduction of vaccines back in December, there was 11 straight weeks of decline in infections. Then we hit a speed bump and we plateaued, just like the country did. We plateaued, and then now we have a true downward decline right now. So is this an indication that this trend will continue? I'd like to see more weeks behind us with a downward trajectory to make that claim, but hopefully this is a good sign, a good indication that now that vaccines are rolling out in greater volume to a native country, that this rate will continue to decline. But it's a stark reminder that this is still very much present in our communities and continues to be a factor every day and every week as the numbers show. Looking at what's occurring throughout the Bemidji area, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, the number of cases in parentheses is the number of new cases in the past week. So in Michigan, 177 cases, in Minnesota, 143, and then here in Wisconsin, 55, which almost a factor of three times lower than Michigan and Minnesota. If people remember back in October and November, Wisconsin and the native population here in Wisconsin were really devastated with the numbers, ranging in the 300 of new cases weekly versus what was much less prevalence in Michigan and Minnesota. Now that's kind of flipped. Yes, vaccines have been introduced, but now we see the flip where Michigan and Minnesota are showing three times the number of cases that are occurring here in Wisconsin. So dynamic changes that are occurring. What occurs here is going to be absolutely different than what occurs in other parts of the country and even our neighboring states. Now, here's a line graph looking at the rate of single dose infection vaccinations here in Milwaukee County. This is the rate, so it's not accumulative. It is what was the rate of vaccine at the moment of time in the county by race. And so we have comparisons here with AIAN native population. As we go, we see there was two significant increases in rates of vaccine, and this occurred in March. And this correlates with the two events that we held here at our facility to vaccinate. After that, yes, we are still vaccinating, but nowhere close to the rate that we were before. And obviously now we start seeing that rate dramatically decrease. Now, it's not just the native population, it's all of the entire population. All races are starting this decline. So like we've been talking about, when I've been talking about changes that are occurring throughout the state, when we look more specifically at what's going on here in Milwaukee County, that rate is also declining, and perhaps more dramatically than we would like to see, but nonetheless, it is occurring throughout the city. when we look at this bar graph, looking at the rate, the percent of race or ethnicities who've gotten at least one dose, we see that the Native population here is nearly 40%, followed with the Asian category of 40%. And then we start looking at what's occurring in our Hispanic and African American population, where that is just barely like 21% of the Black population here in Milwaukee have gotten at least a single dose. And so I pose this question to my staff today: is so why are we seeing this wide range of vaccines? Because you know, the vaccine is definitely in high supply right now. However, the demand is dramatically down from even 6 weeks ago. So the availability of the vaccine is so wide and diffuse now. I mean, you could go to any pharmacy in the city, and if you wanted to get a vaccine, you'd be able to get it probably on the spot as a walk-up. You know, we've had multiple schools in the Milwaukee public school system, multiple schools that have actually dedicated resources and space to the vaccine of the community. And although there was an initial push for it, it obviously declined very rapidly over the subsequent weeks. We have the Wisconsin Center, who they're open. You can walk up right now and get a vaccine and be out in 30 minutes. And so, you know, I'll kind of pose this question back to the audience, because I don't have a true answer to this, because it can't be because there's a lack of supply of vaccine. That can't be the reason, not anymore. So there has to be other explanations as to why this is occurring. And I think it's important that people have these discussions as to why this is, because I'd like to see it much higher. I'd like all of the categories here to obviously be much higher. And this may go back to that notion of hesitancy, people having their fears. You know, we're not talking about so much the anti-vaxxers. We're talking about kind of the other groups here, and other groups that include people who are fearful, perhaps people who were ex vaxxers, people who were kind of believed in vaccinations, but because of concerns about you know, how rapidly this vaccine was created, that they are against that. They're not against vaccines, but perhaps they are against the notion of how quickly this was created and developed in response to this pandemic. And so, you know, there's no one right way to kind of classify why this hesitancy. I do suspect that there is a fair amount of fear of this vaccine in the community, and it almost is in a way so prominent that it is paralyzing communities to make decisions, and decisions moving forward as to what would be in the best interest of the community. And so that's, you know, that's what we're seeing right now. So what I'm going to do right now, because we did start a little late, but I want to give this back to Mark and Jeremiah for questions that may be out there, so we can have an open discussion.
So back in it, Jeremiah, I know you're with us, and and I think it's a good question, right? One that came in earlier, and it's probably one that Jeremiah has. He's representing on Facebook. And Jeremiah, do you have any context for the question? It's kind of, to me, it feels like I got vaccinated. I'm in front of one of my relatives, and they're liking it to, it's like you go to a Brewers game, you're having fun, enjoying it, you're with your family, maybe it's Native Day sponsored by whatever Native entity. You go up to the stand there, and you're buying sodas and hot dogs for your kids, and someone behind you don't know, not Native, is like, hey, sorry, I'm gonna buy you a soda. That's the dad who's got his kids around him. I'm like, I don't think so. It's unknown to him. This guy's flashing money. What's he want, kind of stuff. I think that has a lot to do with what's happening here. And again, it's good that we separate the anti-vaxxers from those who are hesitant.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we get into arguments, you never know who's in the area, and you're in with an anti-vaxxer who'll never be convinced. You could answer their challenge, but the challenge just continues to go on and on and on and on, instead of saying, oh, hey, or looking at a thing and saying, you know what, those are really good questions. Now that I've addressed them, maybe we can go together, or maybe if you need a ride, I can find you one, or maybe whatever. But the question that we're looking at right here, Jeremiah, if you could represent that, it feels like it's like a challenge, and you come up with an answer, and it's a good place to start, right? Is just with that open wonder and someone that has courage to represent it. So, all right, Jeremiah, you are on. Let's hear it.
Yeah, and so that one came out pretty quick, as soon as it, I think, shared to Facebook, and it was, I think, sorry, I think doing a little construction over here. So that was pretty much posted right away, and just trying to say, and I think we dealt with this question very early on when vaccines were coming out, or maybe had just come out, but just people asking for proof that these vaccines are healthy or going to be healthy long term. Down the line, years down the line, are you going to start feeling effects or something of a vaccine? That was this person's hesitancy. I believe they may have deleted, or they definitely deleted their comment. So I wasn't able to try and get back and respond to that person. But that seemed to be their hesitancy, and I feel like that's not. They're probably not alone in that sense. Just people trying to figure out, because the newness of these, how quickly they came out, stuff like that. And so I think that's their question, is just how do we have proof? How do we? And I don't think can anybody answer that, but yeah, if you could kind of address that question from a long-term standpoint.
So this is going to be a whole new kind of group of discussion, because hesitancy and anti-vaxxers. So I think the most important thing, and we're going to have spin-offs of information and facts that come out, but I think when we look at, and this is why this forum is so important, is that I try to play this as straight as possible, and I give people the facts. I am as objective as I possibly can, because I want to make sure that the information that is discussed or presented is based in facts and not of opinion, or a subjective sense. I want to be factual in everything that I offer here. But I think when it comes to hesitancy, and this could talk about are these safe, or, the speed, or, are these, are these, are these real concerns, or is it more of just having more information to explain how this has come to be so quickly, and how do we truly know what the long-term effect is? Now, because of the newness, we won't know the long term. You know, Pfizer and Moderna came on so quickly with a vaccine, quicker than any other previously known technology platform on a vaccine, because this is new. I mean, we are in an uncharted area here, and I'm not saying that this is, us running downhill blindfolded with scissors in the middle of the night, hoping we can get to the bottom without falling and hurting. Information, science, data, information analysis, and technology is kind of guiding our way in the most effective manner as possible. mRNA technology is new. But what we have now versus 20, 30 years ago is completely different in how we actually get to a point of where we can develop a vaccine. We had to genetically sequence the virus. Now, the technology for us to do that now is so much different than it was 30 years ago. We have supercomputers now, supercomputers on top of supercomputers that can do these genetic sequences within hours. Versus 30 years ago, it would take months, if not a year, to do. Now we can do them in a matter of minutes. And so a lot of that pre-development has dramatically shortened. And so, but from creating a vaccine to where we are now, that time frame really hasn't changed. It still goes through clinical trials. It still goes through data analysis, crunching. That part from actually to the point of where we've got to have a vaccine, that has dramatically been shortened, but not in its safety and efficacy timeframes of proving its worth. That part hasn't changed. So if there's hesitancy on the speed, well, technology, modern technology has gotten us to a point where that has sped up, but not of its efficacy or safety in development of a vaccine. That is fact, that hasn't changed. So that's kind of a long way to answer of just speed of this vaccine should not, I'd like to say that it should not be a factor as long as you know the understanding of how these are created, the vaccines are created. I think it would change your mind in a favorable way to get the vaccine, knowing that modern technology has sped that process up. It's the same process, it's just done quicker now.
Dr. Ignace.
Could I just add one? Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Jeremiah.
I was just going to ask or add another kind of maybe secondary question. So I know early on too, or maybe not early on, but as the virus has stuck around, wasn't there studies and proof that there have been, in fact, lingering effects of getting COVID itself, rather than, any studies or anything related to, anything lingering from getting the vaccine itself?
Yeah, so, we've heard of the long haulers, people who've gotten COVID, and this really is looking at people who get COVID recover, vast majority recover, but there are people that just have continued lingering symptoms, and that could be anywhere from fatigue to mild to even hair loss to joint problems to concentration. And so we know this virus is so new. I mean, we're looking at 12 months of data and information that we are getting in real time, trying to make decisions in real time, projections in real time. And this is hard. It's not like this has been around and all of the pathology that has resulted of this. I mean, we are dealing with this in real time to the point of trying to make informed decisions on how best to move forward, not only in its prevention and strategic protection, but also its treatment as well. I mean, this is all real time stuff. I mean, and so we know that people can handle it, have lingering symptoms. We've only been dealing with vaccines for about 6 months. And so are there going to be lingering symptoms from the vaccine? Well, we know from history that there are lingering symptoms from other technology of vaccines that already have been in existence. You know, people do get anaphylactic reactions. People do get side effects. People have other adverse effects from vaccines. So, you know, to say there will be no adverse effects from vaccines, I think that's an impossible statement to make. You can't make that statement because there always will be. It's just what type of adverse effects and is people in society willing to accept as being safe or effective to at least assure their safety and prevention of infection. So these are all risk modifications that we all go through every day, and trying to be risk adverse to situations. And the best way to do that is only to be as well informed as you possibly can to making those decisions.
So Dr. Ignace, we're just a bit past our 4 o'clock time. It is about hesitancy.
No.
So a couple things on that I can offer from the space of education. In study after study after study, especially after the recent political years we've been through of recent, right? So the recent political years of recent. What we found out in communication and what has been true for the longest time is that it'll only convince so many people with facts and figures, which of course are necessary, needed, and an important part of it. But there is an extra space to go, which can be convincing, and that is of personal story. Mm-hmm. When someone's asking you a question, you relate something that's personal, you relate a narrative that is important to you. Because what you're trying to do is create trust in that person so they're able to receive a message. And especially around vaccines and looking at some of those numbers, especially in hard-hit communities, as we are and have been, in African-American brothers and sisters, Latino brothers and sisters in that struggle of justice in our communities, that there's still a distrust of the government. And if we want trust, we got to get that from trusted sources. It's not any different than any other culture.
No.
United States, you know, when you were a kid, who were the most trusted broadcasters and news people in the United States? They were usually white guys, over 50. How much our country has changed. Try to find me a broadcaster who is a white guy and over 55 on a major network giving people the news. You know, it's changed the manner of communication, how we communicate, what effectively is communication. All of this leads to this last question from me as we close down this session on COVID-19. And that is, what have you found to be most effective in the doctor-patient relationship to convince someone who's heard either bad news or news they weren't expecting or news they are expecting but they don't want to hear? Mm-hmm. What has been your most effective way to communicate with that person information that they need to know for their health and for some preservation of quality or extension of their life? With that, it'll be my last question, and you have the last part of our program, of course. Dr. Ignace?
So, you know, that's an interesting point of view and question. And yeah, I mean, who do you believe? at the end of the day, I mean, are you going to believe what you see on TV? And probably not. But you're going to take your own personal accounts and experiences and knowledge, and you know, you do ask questions from other people. What I've experienced in one-on-one discussions, I do hear hesitancy. I hear fearfulness about the vaccine, just because they heard from someone who had problems. And it really comes down to two things. You have to be absolutely upfront with people what the anticipation is and the side effects that come with it. And you have to be crystal clear as to what those side effects are. I've had multiple patients who have been hesitant, and I've explained what these side effects are. I think individuals need to have at least an entrusted person that they know or have direct interactions with. And so hearing side effects is one thing. But my conversation typically ends with, I've already been vaccinated personally. And then I give my own personal account of the vaccine. But I definitely am upfront. I'm very factual. And I will tell individuals that people can have mild, I mean, they can have a wide range of symptoms. And really at the end, posing the question back to individuals so they can make decisions on their own is, would you rather have a day of side effects from a vaccine versus 14 days and possibly a poorer outcome by getting COVID? When I put it in those terms, after explaining I've done this, the side effects are this, I would much rather have a day of side effects, as mild or moderate or as heavy as they are, because I know it's going to end. I know the side effects I'm going to get over the side effects within a day, versus the unknown of getting COVID and not knowing what's going to happen in a 2-week span, or even worse, something bad. I think the decisions become easier for people to make in those terms, as outcomes of one versus the other. And 9 times out of 10, individuals will elect to get the vaccine. So putting it in terms that people can understand, being at risk adverse to something they know could be bad either way, but what's the least path of bad that you could possibly have that will cause the least amount of harm? Well, it actually is, in this scenario, getting the vaccine. So Mark, Jeremiah, and these were good questions, and I look forward to continuing this, and I'd like to try to broaden this out and maybe try to get down to some more of this hesitancy and what this actually may look like. Because the flip side of this hesitancy for not only age groupers but also racial and ethnic groups, this difference in rates of vaccine are going to have an impact on communities without a doubt. It's going to have an impact, and I'd like to try to explore this a little bit more. And I would like to see questions from the audience and people's thoughts as to what this may be. So until next time, everyone stay strong, and we'll see you next week.